Hello and welcome to the Roundtable podcast. I am Shogun. We are the Roundtable Discord server. You can easily find us by searching Conspiracy on Discord or the Roundtable. We're on all social media. We have a website, whatever. Come find us. That being said, this is a podcast. Today's special guest will be Data, good friend of mine, top administrator of the server. We're going to kind of start by talking about her life, her issues, whatever is going on with her future, and then we'll open it up and we'll just roll from there. So, Data, the reason your situation is interesting is because you're quite young, you're an adult, but you're also quite talented. You're applying for different schools, you're quite intelligent. So, why don't you tell us about where you're at right now? Maybe it'll be an interesting scenario. What are you looking at? What are your options? What's your goals? I'm just jumping right into it. I think it's interesting. Sorry about my cat. What's the situation? What's Data's life like right now? What's Data's life like right now?
Well, currently I'm just coming off my college applications, so I've been blessed with enough means to apply to various colleges across the United States. I'll name some of them because I don't know which one I'm going to quite yet, although I've heard back from a few of them. Worcester Polytechnic Institute, University of Texas at Austin, Penn State, Northeastern, UC Santa Barbara, UC San Diego, UCLA, and UC Davis, and UC Berkeley. So that's the colleges that I've applied to right now. If you want to more about my college experience, I went to an early college high school. I am finishing high school with an associate's degree in mathematics, and whether I have to take a full 4 years of college is up in the air. Depends on what scholarships I get, where I go, and what their unit acceptance rate is right now.
Right. So you have been essentially in college / university since what age?
15, 16, right about there.
Right. And so you're obviously on an accelerated program, which meant people in your institution recognized early that you were gifted and precocious and talented. So they fast-tracked you, and you're actually graduating high school with a university degree. Is that correct?
It's more of like a local college degree, and the fast tracking generally happens about middle schools when they start putting you on the math plan. Particularly, you need a certain level of math, although you can also accelerate in other things as well. So, for instance, I started my foreign languages a little bit earlier, which allows me to take extra languages at the end. But when you fast track in middle school, assuming you have one or two schools open, there's actually something called a public magnet school. And it's a public school that allows students to self-elect to go there. So I actually applied to go to the school, although it was recommended by my counselors and my principal that I go there. And after a self-selection process, you get admitted, and then you get access to college classes after you have your high school requirements met.
So let me get this straight. You are studying which foreign languages? Like, you obviously speak English fluently, that's evident. What other languages are you partially or fully fluent in?
So right now I speak English as my main language. If I have to pick a secondary language, I'll pick American Sign Language. This was initially taught to me in preschool, so I had a little basis when I was younger, which I think is advantageous. And then I've been taking a class for American Sign Language. I did 3 years of Spanish, which is pretty customary for most high schools, but I've been in 4-language seminar for another year afterwards, so it's more equivalent to 4 years of Spanish. And then right now I am studying Japanese because I wanted to, and it's cultural.
Right. So you speak what? You're essentially trilingual, quadrilingual? What would you say, if
currently
anything?
fluent in only English and American Sign Language, and I do know quite a bit of Spanish, almost fluent. I can understand nearly all the conversations. I just don't prefer it because the grammar isn't my favorite.
Okay. So what is your interest, right? Obviously you're gifted. You are identified as gifted early. So you basically get to write your ticket. I know how this goes. You get to write a full ride. So where do you write your full ride to? Like, if you get a full ride to do anything you want, I mean, full ride meaning a fully paid scholarship, which I think is essentially guaranteed in your case, then what do you do? What are you interested in? Is it AI? Is it medicine? Like, is it politics? Like, what's your aspirations? I mean, you've told me that you want to be potentially a nuclear submarine captain, which shows a very unusual orientation. to be honest, for a female. Most females do not want to live in a little fucking metal tube underwater. So what are your goals?
Well, I'll touch on the nuclear submarine part later, but some of my interests right now include robotics, and I like a lot of computer programming, and I enjoy learning about physics and whatnot. So, based on my current aptitude and what I'm good at, I decided to pursue a career in STEM, and particularly what interests me the most right now is electrical engineering. So, I'd like to become an electrical engineer, and I'd like, if I had to pick some schools to go to, anything I listed earlier, I would be happy to go to, and I'm sure I'd be able to find great professors and a good program there. After school, that's a big question for me because I've always had interests across the board in STEM. So I liked math, I liked physics, but I also liked a little bit of bio, right? So I was almost a biomed major. If I have to pick a career to go into, the reason you heard nuclear submarine captain is because I've always liked the discipline in the military, and I think that their ideals line up with a lot of my ideals. So it might be a good place. Also, the military has a lot of money, and if I want to do research anywhere, the military probably would be my best bet for funding that research. If I want to make a big global impact, that would be excellent.
Okay, so here's my question for you. Let's say somebody says, okay, data is, 99.9th percentile or first percentile, whichever it is, the very top of the heap, right? So you're given a free thing. It just says, rate your own ticket. We're going to give you whatever money you want to do whatever you want. What is the most important thing that you could apply your intelligence to? So let's say you're more intelligent than anyone else, right? I'm not saying this, but let's say this was the case, and you have unlimited funding. So money's not an option. You get the power. What are you going to focus your attention on?
Well, for one, I'm not the most intelligent person in the world, and I think there are just geniuses out there, and I wouldn't categorize myself quite that way. And I just want to be respectful of other people who, really do have a lot of talents as well. If I had to create an ideal situation, I would like to go into research, and I would like to research things that, basically robotic solutions to current problems like nanotechnology and cancer. Really, we live in a world with people, and I'd like to come back to that people world focus to help others. If I have extra time later in my career, I am planning to do Engineers Without Borders. So there is a big humanitarian pull to this. So just progression as a general of technology, as well as coming back to help people.
So let me say I give you three options. One, you're the top of the top in politics. Two, you're the top of the top in science. Three, you're the top of the top in military. Which would you choose?
If I was only given those three options, I would choose science. And the reason I would choose science is because I think while politics is excellent, and I wouldn't mind being president, but that's probably not in the best interests of my own best interests. I think that I could make the most impact in the STEM field, and I think that that's where my passion is. And generally, when people have a passion towards the subject, they tend to excel and do better in it. So I'd like to go where my passion lies.
So is that your dog that's barking, just out of curiosity?
No, it's the neighbor's dog.
All right.
Throw some Benadryl over it. I'm just kidding.
Okay. So again, the reason I ask, right, and I know the people are going to interpret this as some kind of boasting. It's not. When I was through school, I got to write my own ticket, and they just give you whatever money you want because if you're smart enough, they just throw money at you. So the only thing that matters is what you choose to do with it. And if I had had the clarity of reason to understand the potentials before me properly, then there is no limit, right? Because everything's a meritocratic competitive hierarchy. You're 18 years old. You're clearly smarter than I am. I'm 30 plus, and I was rated 99.9997 decimal 003 above me, but you're above me, and you're 18. You're half my age. So objectively, you're a lot smarter than I am. So I would encourage you to save the world because someone's got to, and I can't. So please fucking solve climate change, deal with the ocean superheating, deal with desertification, deal with the deforestation, deal with the methane issue, okay? if you could put your brain towards figuring out how to get the methane back in the planet, then maybe I could have kids, which would be great. So can you maybe save the world for me?
Well, I can't make any promises because we don't really know the future. And I wanted to touch on this infinite possibility. I actually really like that as a concept. And of course, everything has limitations in our own pragmatic, quote unquote finite worlds. But I really do think that everybody has, to an extent, this possibility, and it's really just a matter of how much you're willing to take advantage of it and how much you can take advantage of it. And so that's, out to whoever's listening to this, may you take advantage of your own possibility. And to answer your questions about climate change, so something I'm working on right now, I don't really have a lot of resources, but I really am excited about this subject, so I've decided to pursue it anyway. I'm looking at piezoelectric transductors right now and how to use them in a way to capture energy. And this fascinates me because, electrical engineering, so it's right up my career field. And two, I think that changes in pressure are relatively constant and they can happen at a macro and a micro scale. So there are plenty of instances where we could capture this energy and start on, renewable projects. I've heard many other projects as well, and I'd be happy to research them too. It's all just, where can I make the biggest impact and what makes sense? What's logically our best shot?
Yeah, because if I was, I don't know, Vladimir Putin and you were a Russian citizen, or if I was the king and I had you, I'd say, okay, let's give her the biggest portfolio, right? The biggest problem we face. And not just you, but anybody else on that same level of precociousness, giftedness, high IQ, high intelligence, high success rate, right? Organizational skills, social skills, introspective skills, right? I mean, the round table, everybody knows it's a meritocratic hierarchy. You've been sussed out, you've been checked out, you've shown your skills. So we all know where you're at. And it's not just you, right? We got Sepia in the room, brilliant dude. We got NSA, brilliant dude. We got Mech, brilliant dude. Ainsoft, brilliant dude. Tech, brilliant dude. Dr. Weird, brilliant dude. I mean, I'm not neglecting any of the other people. Essentially, everyone here is very talented. So the point is, how do you put people's talents towards a popular or meaningful reason? And the truth is, whatever we hope to aspire to in terms of space travel, genetic engineering, improving the human race, eugenics, colonization of the moon, Mars, Saturn, we need to live long enough as a human race and as a species and as a planet for these things to be possible. And if we can simply find a way to not all die, then this will all happen. So please cross, like you are the Zoomers, right? They call you Zoomers. They call me a boomer. My girlfriend calls me a boomer. So I'm a boomer. You're a Zoomer. Okay, Zoomers. Congratulations, you're a Zoomer. Save the world so we don't all die, please.
It's not about, oh, can you please do it? It's about we have to do it. You can't just say, oh, please save the world when, if you want to make the argument about climate change, if we are pumping, I do believe in climate change because I don't believe that you can pump an obscene amount of a chemical into the air and imagine it doesn't change its composition and physical properties of the air itself and have consequences, whether positive or negative. So I do believe in consequences as a whole concept and thus climate change. So it's not a question of if I want to, it's going to be a question of that's what the world needs. And it's less of a plead and more of a responsibility.
And that's why go ahead, Dr. Wade.
I'm sorry. So here's the thing with climate change. Dr. Freeman Dyson worked on a lot of these climate models back when they were first forming in the 1980s and 90s. And here's what he says. He says that it's overblown for the following reasons. Number one, they have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that mankind's, the emissions, the so-called pollutants, CO2, etc., is having a noticeable effect on the environment. And correlation doesn't equal causation. Right now, they can only show correlation. There are alternative models, specifically Birkeland filaments, sunspot activity, and various other things that are also occurring that also correlate with the weather patterns. That's the first issue. The second issue is we only really have 100 years of recorded global climate data to go off of, and then the geological data is only rough estimates, nowhere near close enough to make the kinds of accuracy statements that a lot of the climate scientists are making. The third issue is even if you can prove causation and not just correlation, now you have to prove now we basically have to prove what effect that's going to have, right? So we can prove that okay, sure, we've gone from correlation to causation. We've proved that mankind's, CO2 emissions is having an effect, right? So now we have to prove what that effect is going to be and will it be bad, right? So even if there is an effect, we don't know if this is actually going to have a good or a bad outcome. It might depend on your geographic location. So somebody in northern Canada, in fact, Canada, period, and then Russia, Siberia, suddenly a lot of just wasteland, just tundra and wasteland can become arable farmland. So, just because, the earth is warm, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So we have to really prove that it's bad too, not just, not just good, not just neutral or possibly even good. So there's a lot of issues I take with the current zeitgeist of climate, global warming, call it whatever you want. There's just a lot of issues, and they jump to a lot of radical conclusions prematurely and based off of models that are arguably functioning off of flawed premises and assumptions.
So I want to respond a little bit, Dr. Weird. I really respect what you said, and I think you had some very valid points there. I agree with some of them to an extent. What I don't agree with is that if climate change, is real. So let's say we can prove, the causation. You already made that argument. There are many people living in low-lying lands, such as like Bangladesh, the whole country. High population there. That's going to lead to economic strife in the future as those people move out and as the land is lost there. So we have to think about, checks and balances. Would the tundra opening up above, Canada and Russia, would that be worth the already populated places in, lower lying areas? And I don't really think it's up to me to make that decision, nor do I think I really have direct control over, I maybe have indirect control over how climate change, if it exists, because I'm not going to make a conclusion here, over what climate change is going to do, but I do believe I can do, my piece, and whether how small or big that is going to have an effect. So it's not really my place to make that argument, so long as I can't draw a reasonable conclusion from the existing data. And you're right, the existing data is only 100 years old, so whether that's the whole natural cycle of the Earth or not is to be determined. I do believe that we are having a consequence on the environment, though, just because, when you rearrange, if we are only components, pieces, and rearrange Lego bricks essentially of models of particles, and in a delicate balance with other rearranged particles, when we start rearranging these particles even further, through emission, there will be a consequence, and what that consequence is may be undetermined, but there will be a consequence.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the butterfly effect, right? So if you go outside and you play with your, let's say you have a dog and you play with your dog and you accidentally step on, an invasive Asian lady beetle or an ant, right? Well, over time, this might have profound ramifications, but it's indeterminate and impossible to know what those ramifications are via the butterfly effect. So yes, anything that anyone does can potentially have massive ramifications, especially long-term over longer periods of time, and even short-term. But is it possible to determine that? And would trying to solve, assuming we can prove not just correlation but also causation, would the attempt at trying to solve the causational issues be worth it? One of the biggest issues is that no matter what the U.S. or Europe does, China alone is burning more coal than the entire rest of the world combined. And India alone is burning more coal than the entire rest of the world combined if you subtract China from the equation. So basically, in order to solve, assuming global warming is a causatory thing and there's not some other factors like sunspot activity, solar cycles, Birkeland currents, or various other, field activity or solar activity or, all sorts of issues that can come into play. Assuming it's not one of those, assuming it's even this change is even meaningful at all, and it is actually even a change at all, assuming even that, the solution might be we just have to fucking nuke Russia and China, or not Russia, but China and India, or massively depopulate. So, seriously, if that's the
well, why do we need to nuke Russia again, Dr.
Not
Russia. What would be the advantage of that?
Well, because they're putting out more CO2 and burning more coal than the entire rest of the world combined, each independently.
Russia is not burning more coal than the rest of the world combined.
I meant to say India. So China is burning more coal than the entire rest of the world combined. And India burns more coal than the entire rest of the world combined minus China.
And one of the main reasons why China is burning the most amount of toxic chemicals into the atmosphere is because they are producing the things which the rest of the world buys. So whether we have the same amount of toxic produced in toxic materials produced into one place like China, or whether each country has its own share of toxic waste production factories, it's irrelevant because our current consumerist model of life is not is actually the issue which creates the toxic waste. So we would need to quite drastically change our mindset and our way of life in order to get rid of the pollution we create. It's not just nuking a country and get done with it.
Though I agree, I was basically stating that to illustrate a point and using hyperbole that, you know, the Greta Thunberg solution requires massive depopulation of the human species. There is another solution, and the other solution is to embrace the nuclear-powered future. If we use fast-spectrum molten chloride reactors, we can basically end all forms of, you know, all forms of pollution entirely. We can create carbon-neutral synthetic motor fuels using dimethyl ether extracted from the air and seawater that recombine back into liquids. And this is actually very interesting. It would actually be cheaper and more economical to create synthetic motor fuels via the Sabatier reactor coupled to zeolite catalysts to make long-chain hydrocarbons, or medium-chain hydrocarbons, I should say, and transport them over rail, pipeline, and truck. It would actually be more efficient to do that than to generate electricity using the nuclear power and then transmit that over the lines, because the grid is horrendously inefficient. We get 30 to 40% energy losses in the transmission of the grid, and if we can develop, you know, a highly efficient pulse detonation engine that is, let's say, 80+% efficient, suddenly it'll actually be less energy costly to convert the energy into motor fuels, transport the motor fuels, and then convert it back into electrical energy on site. And it's very strange, but it's true, because the amount of energy it takes to transport liquid hydrocarbons in even the most inefficient way, which is via truck, is less than 1% of the total amount of, you know, energy lost to transport it.
So, Dr. Weird, extremely fascinating, extremely valuable, extremely useful info. I think I heard Queen's voice. Was that Queen? Let's hear in the room.
I wanted to.
No, that was Data. That was Data. Go ahead, Data.
I'll respond to your point. So yes, let me recap. You made the same point twice. I definitely agree. Butterfly effect it does exist. And you were talking about these fast-paced, advanced technologies. Yes, that is exactly the field I'm going into. So in many ways, the argument you presented is already aligned with the whole story that I've told already. And I appreciate your contribution. And I thought you brought up some fascinating things. So thank you for that.
So absolutely, he did. But he did bring up fascinating things. And okay, if Rhodesian has a question, please ask a question, and then after that, I have a question for Data.
So I just wanted to go back on something that Dr. Weird mentioned about nuking.
You're cutting out, Rod.
I'm sorry, you're cutting out, Rhodesian. If you can leave, rejoin, unplug, replug. So,
I mean, obviously, I wasn't actually.
Hold on, Dr. Weird. Hold on. That was all good material, right? But I do want to ask specific questions and pursue a specific line. So, go ahead.
It might be a little bit better now. I just wanted to ask in regards to King China or India. So, I read that.
I'm sorry, Rhodesian. I'm going to ask you to reset your computer, your phone, your connection. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to ask a question to Data, and we can go back to what Dr. Weird said. But this is my question, right? So you are 18 years old, right? I'm 30 plus, just over 30. So what is it that you think our generation or my parents' generation fucked up? And what do you think, if anything, your generation is going to fix? Because trust me, the post-war generation fucked up. My generation fucked up. Is your generation just going to fuck up in a new way, or are you going to actually turn this tide back and get us back on the right track? Because I think it's obvious we're going in the wrong direction. Obesity rates are going up. Life expectancy is going down. Political unity in the United States is dividing along left and right lines. American imperial hegemony is losing credibility. Trump has discredited America. So I'm assuming you're American. I know you're American. Is there a second act coming here for humanity? Is there a second act coming for the human race? Is the Zoomers going to save us, or are they just going to watch the last chapter of our fall? I know it's a big thing, right? But the thing is, it's not going to be the boomers. It's not going to be my generation that saves us, right? It's going to have to be the youth. It's going to have to be, because they're going to have to see something that we did wrong, something they can do right, and they're going to have to save our ass, right? They will, because if the youth don't, then nobody will. Because the youth have the most invested. They have their future ahead of them. I'm already past caring about life, and I'm only 30. So trust me, the 50, 60, 7-year-olds, they don't give a fuck. So if anyone's going to save the world, it's the young folk.
So
I want
Dr.
to coin.
Weird, I was going to ask about you said about.
Hold on, that was a
with
question I already asked
China
today to Rhodesian. While you were gone, I asked a different question, so you'll have to wait. I'm sorry.
I see. That was go ahead.
I want to coin the term doomer
Sapia,
for the next
Sapia.
generation.
Tapia, that question was to Data. The
So,
question
to-
again, to reiterate, is what did we do wrong and what are you going to do right? And it's not a loaded question, it's very sincere.
So I don't really know if there's any wrong or right. I'm very hard on determinism, and what that means is that I believe that we are just a culmination of not only our DNA but our environment in which we grew up. And people are going to argue for free will. I can give that full argument if you'd like, but I'd rather save time and get to the content of the point. In a deterministic society, the trick is to avoid fatalism, right? Now, fatalism is the idea that if everything is controlled, then therefore everything I do is meaningless. When in fact it's not. Just because there's a deterministic outcome ultimately does not mean that you and your subjective reality is not meaningless. And so what I think that is going to be the crux of, our human civilization, what the crux of what our parents might have done wrong was a lack of personal responsibility. So when you raise a kid, you have to teach them to have responsibility, self-discipline. You have to make them the best model of yourself that you can be, and not maybe of yourself, but the best model you can find. And I feel like that is investing in the next generation, because you're wrong in the sense that you're 30 and so you don't care, and you're wrong in the sense that grandparents are old and they don't care, because they are going to not necessarily live on, but their genetic code and the rest of their investments will be in their children. So it's not only that the children have investments in their future, but the adults have investments in their children. And so disregarding that second half is really neglecting society, neglecting the future generation. And then you can't say, oh, I'm going to neglect the future generation and hope they save everyone. What you want to do is you want to support the future generation so that they can become better selves and support their future generation, and thus start a more positive cycle. And you might wonder why I went into the interpersonal relationships of this rather than staying general. And the reason is because, I don't see, I can see how a whole mindset can shift of a population, but I can also see how mindsets shift in individuals, and they're the same parallel. So the parallel that I'm drawing here can also be drawn at a larger scale. You can scale it up and down. And another thing is, my generation, are we going to save it or destroy it? Well, I actually kind of view this more objectively as general phenomena. And in terms of, where things are going, up or down, you hear the news every day, something's gone wrong or something's gone right, and it's all just more phenomena. I do believe that humans have a natural tendency, a little bit of, I wouldn't call it a bipolar, but definitely an up and down. And what happens is we tend to go down pretty far. But as long as we survive, sometimes we don't learn from the mistakes of our past, but it's very unlikely that pattern reiterates. And I think it's just more of the continuous phenomena.
All right, well, thank you for that answer. Very good answer. Rhodesian, did you want to reiterate your question?
Well, absolutely, providing my mic allows me to do so. So, Dr. Weird, you mentioned nuking China or India as some kind of a way to combat climate change, but there was a study that was done that said even the most limited of nuclear exchanges would release almost 700 million tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, including releasing around 300 billion tons of soot, which would even have an effect of blocking out the sunlight. So would this realistically be a way of actually combating climate change?
I said that euphemistically to basically make a hyperbolic point to illustrate that the idea that we can just reduce our quality of life and save energy is sufficient as ridiculous. and silly. And even if you, what I was getting at, even if you knew, Thanos snapped 3 billion people out of existence, it wouldn't be enough. That was the point I was getting at.
Ah, I see. Very well. That makes a lot of sense. But also, I would ask as well: is it fair, or would anybody agree with me in saying that the people who were classified as boomers, for example, actually were far better for the environment? Because the people who were classified as boomers, people who grew up in the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, were going to the shops and taking paper bags. They weren't using lots of plastic. They weren't using most of the things that are contributing to the climate change scenario that we have today. So would it be fair to say that the younger generations are actually causing a far greater
No,
effect than the older people ever did?
No. So the reason why companies use plastic bags is because they're cheaper. And companies use these plastic bags, like I said, because they're cheaper. And who owns the company? Well, all the stockholders, the CEOs, the executives, and those that own the stonks. Who owns stonks? Well, it certainly ain't young people. Boomers.
Well, listen, Data, I'm going to address the text. You're saying you don't like this podcast, but I do like this podcast. This is content. This is good content. Rhodesian, yourself, Dr. Weird, you're all producing good content. So if this is not going in the direction that you want, based on you being the special guest, what direction do you want to go?
I got one. I could ask a question.
No. That was a question for Data.
Well, I didn't really felt like, I feel like A, I haven't described my argument well enough, or B, I didn't come full circle with it. The idea is that we are just living in existing phenomena, and whether you had a good day or a bad day, when you get home, and there's someone who needs help, or you're thinking about your own self-interest. What do you want to do? You want to do the next right thing, and whether that's helping yourself so you enable yourself to help other people continue, or whether that's helping other people to continue. It's just.
You seem to have disconnected or dropped out. I can't hear you currently. So you could try leaving, coming back, unplugging, replugging your headset until the data is back. We'll continue with the current conversation. So we have multiple levels. So go ahead, NSA. What were you going to say?
Well, it was going to be a question for Data. I was going to build a quick story and ask.
Well, she may or may not be able to hear us right now. We don't know. But nevertheless, ask your question.
I got disconnected. Sorry. But anyway, just to reiterate the point in case I got cut off at the end, whether the past responsibilities weigh down on us or not, the next question is, can I take the next right step? So the next generation, whether they succeed in it or not, I don't think I'll know the answer. But what I do know is the success will lie in personal responsibility of taking responsibility for the actions in the present as it is, and the consequences of the present, and then taking the next right action.
Right. So my ex used to always have a statement that was a motto in her family, which was, the next step is always yours. So the previous step may be fucked up, and it may not have been yours, or it may have been yours. Maybe you took a misstep, maybe someone else took a misstep, now you're in the wrong place. But you, at any given time, can recognize your current position and your advantageous next position. So, again, I'm intentionally using this podcast, right? We have many people here with many interesting trains of thought. Dr. Weird, Rhodesian, Mech, we know. You can all take this in many directions, but this is a sort of data-focused podcast so far. And I'm quite curious in this because she is a very unique person. And I know I sound like I'm blowing smoke up her ass, but it's objectively, obviously true. There's no legitimate debate on this. Her intelligence level is extraordinarily high, and she's very young. So my question is, Data, you're 18, right? I'm 31, 32, okay? So in that course of time, from 18 to 32, you would be 14 years older, 12 to 14 years older. What do you see in your future? Are we going to have people on the moon? Are we going to have people on Mars? Are we going to have thorium reactors? Are we going to have nanotechnology and artificial intelligence? Are we going to have out-of-control climate change, sea level rise, displacing 80% of people, mass social collapse, out-of-control Venus effect, superheating of the planet, crop failures, pandemics? Like, when you look at your future and you think about your life and you say, okay, let's say I live to be 50. The life expectancy is 80. You're 18. So let's say you live to be 50. Then you would only, someone do the math on this, 32 years? I don't know, whatever. The point is, in your lifespan that you expect to have, where do you think we're going to be? Are we going to all burn? Are we going to all die? Or are we going to get to Star Trek?
So I actually have a very interesting position because I'm not going to answer your question. And the reason I'm not going to is because you're asking me to predict a future that I don't have complete direct control over and therefore will not have a complete, a direct answer for. I like to say that I live in the present, but I prepare, for the future in the sense. So what I do is I live my present to prepare for the future, and I think that that's a good model to live by because whether, we've gone to the Mars, I really do hope we get to Mars. And I have a feeling we will just by the general trend of things. So maybe I will answer that front of that question. But as for all of the other issues, maybe that's not my area of expertise. And all I can say that is living in our present, as long as you, live your present for your future, as in a continuation, as in continuity, that would probably be, where the world is going to go. So that's not a question for me. That's not a question for, maybe your daughter one day. That's a question for everyone to ask themselves right now, because ultimately, who's to say we're not going to Mars right now? Well, you are, because you're not building the rocket ship, right? If you want to do it, you said write your own ticket. It's completely write your own ticket. So if I want to go to Mars, then I'll work on it, and then I'll tell you when I'm going to Mars. Yeah.
Someone throw that on the Quotable channel. If I want to go to Mars, I'll work on it.
Yeah.
So Data, I have a question for you. Do you think it's very reasonable or a good idea to concentrate on getting to Mars and colonizing Mars? Because through the parameters of obviously doing this, we'll have to be able to have the functions and the abilities to obviously change the climate on Mars, which could obviously necessarily help us on Earth. So what are your thoughts on that?
I actually think the Mars plan is kind of, I'm not really sure. I'll tell you my specifics right now, but I don't like the idea of pumping our atmosphere into Mars. I think that it doesn't have the gravity, and I think even SpaceX disproved their own theory about colonizing, so I wouldn't generally suggest that. I do think that if we put a space base there, it might be a good place to go off of. I mean, if we want to keep exploring our vast universe, which I think is something beautiful and fun, and hopeful, because then we can maybe find, other life forms, cool resources, help our species continue, help maybe find a solution to our problem at home afar. There are many places we can look for solutions. We can even look at home to find solutions for home, but other places as well. So I think that infinite possibility of space, and I say infinite because relative to me, it's relatively infinite. Now, whether it is or not is another story, but I'd like to say we should keep exploring space, and I'd like to say maybe Mars could be a base, like a little leapfrog. I don't think we should invest a lot of energy into it and make it a second home, because it never will be an Earth, because it is A, in a different space, B, a different size, C, different compositions, D, not large enough to hold its own atmosphere. So whether you want to use it to, maybe as a vacation site or something, as a leapfrog, there are many alternative solutions than to colonize Mars. But I think we'll probably go there anyway, because it's a good leapfrog pad.
So what if I told you that you're operating based off of some incomplete information? We actually can completely terraform Mars to be very Earth-like, absent of gravity. So that'll be different, and it will cause life to species, but that's okay. However, the reason why Mars can't keep an atmosphere isn't just because it's not big enough. It's kind of shorthand for saying it's not large enough to create a magnetosphere to keep solar winds and radiation from stripping the atmosphere off of it. And Mars does have an atmosphere. It's a very dense atmosphere, mostly nitrogen and CO2 and various other heavy compounds. That being said, we can absolutely create an artificial magnetosphere, and here's the mathematical proof on it linked in the recorded podcast chat. Now they're positing putting in this magnetic field generator on a satellite in orbit. I would just put one on each of the north and south poles for safety and redundancy. That's besides the point. And it will only require 415 megawatts of energy to keep this thing powered up. That's nothing. 415 megawatts, your average natural gas or coal-fired power plant is a gigawatt. So 415 megawatts to give Mars an artificial magnetosphere to allow to have a breathable atmosphere that won't get stripped away by solar winds, very low energy. It shocked me when I first read this mathematical proof on the subject. And so
Doctor, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Not really, though.
Go ahead.
this is back to my main point. It's not my place to say what technologies we have because I have incomplete knowledge. So I would rather just say, if you want that to happen, and if you're interested in that happening, not only promote the idea, just like you did, Dr. Weird, but, work on it yourself, right? If you want something, we as a human race are the ones who decide, maybe not our fate, but we can definitely decide what we do next. And if you make that decision individually, within a deterministic outcome, of course, but that is up to you. So not to cut you short, but I just want to finish the point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the point stands nonetheless that this idea that Mars cannot be completely terraformed is folly at best. And my only caveat to trying to terraform Mars is let's make sure that there's no organic life already on there, that our interference might destroy or crush or render extinct or threaten and danger. So that's the only caveat there. And also let's do some archaeological digging and see what we can find. Other than that, though, yeah, Mars can totally be terraformed.
I agree that Mars can be terraformed. So what I see is two possibilities. One is humans expand to the moon. I actually think we've already expanded to the moon. It's been classified for obvious reasons, but we've been on the moon since the Apollo missions, obviously, because why would we go there if we weren't going to do anything there? We did do something there. We made bases there. We've had bases there, and we're doing other shit there. That's why we went there. The whole idea that we went there for no reason is nonsensical. We went there for a reason. We did things there, and those things are classified for national security reasons. So humans are on the moon, okay? We've been there since, the 1970s, the 1980s? Since the Apollo missions, we went 12, 13 times. We set up bases, and it's obvious. It's common sense. If I spend all this money to fly to China, I'm not going to fly all the way to China and not do anything there. So we did something there. What is it? Well, that's classified. Now, have we been to Mars? Yeah, maybe. There's videos that say we have. There's actually footage of Mars landings, which is quite compelling. It might be fake, but it's very well faked. There's also evidence of farther expanses. So I see in our lifetime, not necessarily probably mine, but definitely Data's, I see the possibility of human being interplanetary. We're not going to go intersolar. We're not going to go interstellar. We're going to go interplanetary. So we should be able to realistically achieve sustainable bases on the moon, which can be used as launch pads for sustainable bases on Mars. We should be able to explore Europa, Ganymede, the moons of Saturn, the moons of Jupiter. We should be able to discover life in multiple places on Mars. There's lichen, there's mushrooms, there's plants on Mars. Probably there's life on the moon that we already know about that is both human and non-human. And we should be able to have bases on the moons of Saturn, the moons of Jupiter. There's liquid water, there's oceans, subarctic oceans in these places. So there's almost certainly life here. It's almost inconceivable there wouldn't be. And I think they already know this. They know there's life on Mars. They're hiding this. They're hiding the UFO presence. They're hiding the life on the moon. They're hiding life on Mars because they still think it's something they need to keep secret for obvious reasons. So I see two futures. One, we have a space-faring Star Trek future with bases on the moon, Mars, the moons of Jupiter, the moons of Saturn, the moons of Venus. We can colonize the atmospheric level of Venus. It's the paradise planet, the atmospheric level. So we can easily colonize the solar system, and we should. And if we don't, it's because we fucked up. So my question is, can the new generation of people be smart enough to solve the problems created by their parents and their grandparents so that we can then become interplanetary? Then do we create AI? Does the AI help us to hurt us? So the question I was asking Data, right, is basically this. Are you, hold on one sec, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the human future, on average?
She's not here. She left to go to soccer, buddy, a couple minutes ago.
All right. Well, there you go. She's got to kick a ball. Priorities.
Kick the ball. Gonna kick the ball.
You got to kick a ball sometimes.
Well, I got one here. We can topic change.
Well, people like to think of things in terms of a generational thing, but it kind of is, but it isn't. The real issue is that most of human civilization and advancement is promulgated and promoted and advanced by eccentric individuals and entrepreneurs and innovators and inventors who tend to be eccentric and borderline crazy. And right now we have a cultural zeitgeist that suppresses their growth and fulfillment to reach maximum potential because these people are weird and strange and the normies don't like it. And so various special interest groups and all sorts of issues pop up, and they basically suppress these eccentric individuals from reaching their full potential, and this stagnates the development of technology and the evolution of humanity. So essentially, we would already be living in that future if not for essentially what I call collectivists holding back these individuals from reaching their full potential because it scares them. They're scared of being left behind. They're scared of being rendered obsolete. They're they're terrified of their own inadequacies in the face of eccentric entrepreneurs and inventors allowed to do their thing and push the limits of humanity, beyond what was thought to be possible. So until the old ways get out of the way, until the regulations, until the bureaucracy, until the dogma, there's even dogmatism in science. Right now, new models like plasma-based cosmological models, the evidence against Einstein field equations and relativity is profound, and the institutions of academia are suppressing it based almost entirely, it seems, out of ego. So until these institutions die, cease to exist by however it happens, then humanity is going to be stuck in a rut. I think hundreds of years from now, as much as we like to masturbate ourselves, going, look how far we've come. We built really fast computers. In reality, outside of IT, every other industry has been stagnant and regulated to death. So 100, 200 years from now, the time period we live in now will be referred to as the Great Stagnation.
Well, so let's talk about something else. So I was going to bring up to ask a question about the historical scenario, piggybacking off Shogun. JFK, if you recall his administration, we can argue whether it was good or not and all this other stuff, but he did a couple of things that were interesting, and later Nixon I'll bring up too, and Lyndon B. Johnson in that era, because it was such a drastic change in a 10-year time period, and this was the adulthood. This would have been the adulthood of the baby boomers, right? Because they were born after 1945, so they would have been, 15, 18, starting to influence society stuff, so she would be in that kind of era. So what we saw in that era was Social Security. Social Security got rolled out as part of a retirement option for these people to protect that generation in the future, right? So that's something that's kind of gone to we fucked that one up now in modern times, because whatever happened, the economy, trading it wrong, giving people the ability to trade like Towns 401k in the market to see if they can make more money off it, stuff like that. So there's all kinds of stuff for that. That's different from Social Security, I know. And then he also did, he did Medicare. So I don't know if you're aware of that. Like, he did the very first kind of socialized medicine effect. So he kind of brought the health of America to the fact that if you watch his speech, it's actually pretty interesting about how he discusses it. He's actually a really good talker. So you can argue whether or not he's a good president or not. And then Lyndon B. Johnson, the civil rights. So that changed the face of the civil rights. And it would have been JFK if he didn't get shot. So I'm wondering if we're going to see any kind of bump like that. Like we saw Obamacare, right? But Obamacare kind of flopped because, I don't know if you guys know the website they used to sign everybody up and all the problems they had in it. It wasn't a very fluid, thorough measure. What I'm trying to say is, in that generation that's hitting the 18, 20, 25-year-old range, what is the generational thing other than climate change for the United States? Like, what is it we're striving for? Because we still don't have health care. We still don't have a lot of these things. The Social Security is failing for retirement and future. There's really no future for
there is a future, but all these old systems, all these old ideas, all these old institutions that have been holding humanity back literally just have to disappear. However it happens, I don't care how. But until people are free and liberated from these arbitrary rules, these arbitrary, constructs, these institutions of stagnation that were created decades ago, until people are freed from those systems that are literally, what most people don't know is any organization that's created over time, the number one objective of that organization is to continue its existence, is to prevent is to survive and propagate, just like anything else. In fact, in the 90s, this was called memes.
You're not addressing anything I said.
No, I'm getting to it. What I'm getting at is that you say, basically what you're getting at is, will the future be bleak or will it be good? Well, here's what it comes down to.
No. What I'm asking is, what are going to be the cultural changes in that time period for that age group? I'm not asking what 50 years in the future, 100 years in the future. What are some right now issues other than that age group is concerned about?
Let me answer that. The answer I came up with is the following. The current inertia of the Zoomer generation is convenience at the price of everything else. Even though that might not sound like the truth. The issue with society right now is that we have abandoned responsibility. We simply do not like to be blamed. We do not blame ourselves. We just want someone else to be to blame. We want to pass on the responsibility to someone else because we are just, my faith, my feelings. The point is that we are not mature. And I'm not talking about the younger generations. I'm talking about humanity in general at this point in time. We are not mature. We have become weak. We are simply a joke compared to a mere 100 years ago, because we do not try to change ourselves for the best. We try to change others, and we do that without changing ourselves for the best first. It's like, if I cannot even be trusted with my life, why should I be trusted with yours as well, and with the life of everyone else? Because we need to properly test things to see if they work before we apply them at a large enough scale. Otherwise, we can get very wrong concepts to be creating nothing short of cataclysms. That is all for now.
Well, it still doesn't really address the question that I was asking, but that's all right. I don't know. Shogun, you got anything?
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Well, I was referring to the things that were going on in the late 60s in the culture clash. What are things that are happening in our culture clash of this generation? Every generation has their thing, right? Generation X, we had Kuwait, we had New World Order discussion with Bush, we had, all these things, globalization, NAFTA. All these things happened in that era, but what's happening in the new era is, we're seeing a swing back, but are we still? But like you said, our life expectancy is going down. Our satisfaction, education, all these things are going down in the United States. How do we make America great again? I know we're talking about the world in general too, but the globalization trend in the world has sucked the life out of America. And I was just watching something on globalization last night about, all these countries are being risen up to the lowest poverty levels in the world. Like, if you look at the world stats, it's great. But then America's faltering. Like, we don't even have healthcare, dude. Like, Canada, all these people, you guys, like, that's where it's at. I don't think that the level of human satisfaction would rise so much in our country, at least. Which would be a good example to the world if we could have done it right, but we didn't. With Obamacare and other things.
So there's differences, many differences. It's actually quite profound and quite sad, because I care a lot about younger people, and I know some younger people, they're adults, but they're younger than me, and they're different, and they're the hope has been kind of bred out of them. Obviously, Data's different; she's got a bright future, but a lot of people are suicidal. Like, they have lost so much, and so much has been taken away from this generation. And even my generation had so much taken away from it from the previous. So the true boomers, right? I've been called a boomer, even though I'm like 30. Real boomers was my parents or even my grandparents, but it was the post-war generation. They had unlimited potential. If they got a degree, if they were veterans, they could have good jobs. They had pensions. They would never get laid off. They had good lives. They could work at the Ford factory, have a house, a white picket fence, a garage, and 2 cars, a wife and 4 kids. Now you're lucky if you can afford 1 kid, living in an apartment, taking the bus, or having 1 car. Like, it's very restricted. There was a sense of possibility then, where if you did a basic medium of work, you could achieve a certain benefit. If you got an undergrad degree, you could kind of rate your ticket, work in this or that field, get a good income, have a family. Now you're lucky if you can raise a family. You're lucky if you can be out of debt. You're lucky if you're not student loans. So it's very constrained. And that's why people like Data are extraordinary, because they're so talented they'll succeed anyway. Whereas most people this day are fucked. Even if you got a master's degree in culture studies or a master's degree in politics, you're going to work at Starbucks. You're going to make, I don't know, $13 an hour. You'll have an apartment. You'll have a girlfriend. You'll have a cat. But you're not going to have a house, 4 kids, and 2 cars. Things are just restricting, and only the outliers are going to thrive. The outliers are going to write their ticket. They're going to get hired by Google or Apple or Facebook or the government or the Pentagon, and they're going to say, how much money do you want? What can you do for us? And they're going to say, I can code this AI for you, or I can solve this hunger crisis. Maybe we can use drones to deliver relief to Sudan. And they'll say, okay, here's your $300,000 a year. But for everybody else, it's going to be, oh yeah, I got a master's degree. Here's your 30 grand in student loans. Here's your Starbucks job at 13 an hour. Maybe we'll give you a minimum raise to 14 an hour if Bernie Sanders wins. There's no real future for most people. That's the truth. Like, most people are going to work at Starbucks, at Costco, at Safeway, at supermarket, even if they have 2 degrees. And they're going to have debt, and they're going to have to service that debt, and then they're going to have more debt for their house, more debt for their kids. So there was like a boom. There was an expansive boom, and that's why they called them boomers, because they were part of a boom. It was like boom. It was like a bubble. It's like anything's possible. And they're like, oh, no, not much is possible. So now you got to be a fucking super genius if you want to write your ticket. In the past, all you had to do is get through school. But it doesn't mean we're hopeless necessarily, but most people are fucked. I mean, most people are kind of fucked. Doesn't mean you can't have a good life. You can have a cell phone, you can have an apartment, you can have a car, you can make some money, you can eat some food. But you're not really, like, producing your shit. You don't have, like, a free ticket to do stuff, unfortunately.
That's a pretty
And-
dark show again.
and that's-
Wow.
Hold on, I want to hear Makina's point there.
I just want to say that was a pretty dark look at things, but it's true, yeah. Most people don't have anything going for them, really, like in terms of a bright future, I guess. But to be fair, there is, there's another scale that you can look at, and that's happiness. I mean, some people in places that you wouldn't expect are actually really happy. And some people in places that you would expect them to be happy are fucking miserable. So I mean, it's not that bad, I guess, for everyone. But yeah, it's a dark world for sure. It's not fair, and very few of us are lucky, and even fewer of us are lucky in the way that we have a balanced gift. So it's horrible, actually. So,
I mean, think about it. On the one hand, a homeless person on the street might have a cell phone. And with their cell phone, they could use the internet, Facebook. So you could have your own YouTube channel and be living on the streets. And that's cool. And maybe you don't starve, and that's good. But in the old days, our parents, they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have technology. They didn't have virtual reality. They didn't have all these things, but they could get a job and have like a meaningful career and like a future, and they rise through the ranks. That really doesn't exist anymore, because the competitiveness of the world economy is such that whatever you do can be done by somebody else for cheaper. And yeah, you got a master's degree from America, New Zealand, or Canada, but this guy's got a PhD from India, so we'll hire him for half the price, and he's actually more educated than you. So he won't even get the money that he deserves as a PhD. You won't get the money you deserve as a master's degree, because globalization allows us to undersell everybody. So if you're a Mexican day laborer working for 30 cents an hour, you're going to get the tomato picking job that used to pay $10 an hour. And if you're a Mexican master's degree, you're going to get a teaching contract for $14 an hour that used to pay 30, and you're not going to get tenure. You used to get tenure. And if you're a PhD 4.0 GPA, well, you've got to compete with the Swedes, the Australians, and this and that. And so it's just like, if you're not able to get a full ride, then what you're getting is debt. You're getting education and a debt certificate. So the average person is told, hey, you need a future, you need an education. It's like, okay, I'll study, I don't know, English or history or politics or psychology. Should be good, but the problem is you're going to end up 30, 40, 50 grand in debt. Your job is not going to hire you based on these degrees. You're going to need a second degree and job experience, but you can't get job experience if you have these 2 degrees, because if you focused on getting a master's degree, you haven't been working, so you've been focusing on school. So they'll say, yeah, you got a good education, but where's your work experience? They'll say, well, how was I supposed to get work experience while I was getting a master's degree? It's a catch-22. You're going to end up with debt, useless degrees, and no future. And you're going to end up working at Safeway, Starbucks, or fucking Future Shop with a master's degree. And in the old days, you could have an undergrad and be the CEO of fucking Ford. Like, really, you could just get a job and have a career and do a good job, and nobody fucked you over. But now, being fucked over is default position number 1.
I think the term Gen Z was chosen over others simply because the current generation, the Gen Z, the Zoomers, are meant to be basically to be the end of the world as we know it. The world ends with them because the culture clash of the younger generation right now is being single and alone and away from other humans, which is basically going against the very things which have made the human race so great at conquering adversity, because we worked together, we actually cooperated. However, nowadays the current narrative being pushed by the mass media is either you become part of the noise without some substance, or you get away from the noise without substance. You go like a hermit, not necessarily a single person, but smaller groups scattered around and not interacting with other groups unless it's mandatory or extremely necessary. Like, I need to go buy groceries, but if I can work from home and still buy groceries with Amazon and so on, I do not need human interaction. And the younger generations are encouraged to pursue that path in life, because the alternative is basically going against the older generations, because you have different ideas, you have potential, they have lost their potential, and so they are jealous of you and will try to destroy you, because misery loves company. And it's just a cycle which keeps repeating. And after the Gen Z will grow up and the population will fall drastically, because that was what the older generations programmed it to be. Then maybe then there will be more freedom, but then again it could just keep repeating until we go extinct. And that is one of the main reasons so many, not only movies, but so much art in general nowadays is which is very popular, is related to an end of the world of sorts, whatever that might be.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I was, even in my generation, I did my master's in the global ecological crisis. I thought I was going to save the world. I was like, okay, I'll apply my intelligence, I'll save the world. Then I applied my intelligence and realized the world was already fucked, and there wasn't anything realistic I could do to save it. So that's why even this new generation fascinates me, because the psychological burden the intelligent ones have is to face an existential horror that is unfaceable. So how does that not crush your spirit? On the other hand, you can be stupid, numbed out, drugged up, and not face it. And I've seen both sides of this generation. Most of them are disconnected. They're taking Xanax, they idealize lean and SoundCloud rappers and Satanism and gangsters, and not even gangsters, they idolize suicide now. Like my generation idolized gangsters. In my generation, we were psyop to believe that, money, chains, bitches, guns, drugs, power, fucking ye, derp. But the new generation is like, it's cool to slit your wrists, man. And be a Satanist, too. And kill yourself and be a Satanist. That's sexy and cool. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but these, like, Billie Eilish types, these fucking Lil Uzi Vert types, it's this new fucking thing where it's like, drink lean, take Xanax, fucking shoot yourself. Yeah, Satan. Woo. And it's, like, literally programmed for self-destruction. Like, somebody has pulled the plug on the human race. I don't know who did it. I don't know why they did it. I don't like that they did it, and I would like to stop them from doing it. But somebody has decided the human race either should not exist or cannot exist or will not exist. So they're now dividing male from female. They're turning parents against children. They're normalizing the sexual abuse of children. It's in the Catholic Church. It's in Belgium. It's in Brussels. It's in the EU. It's in Washington. It's child trafficking. It's rape. It's murder. It's evil. And it's suicide, it's drugs, it's addiction, it's fentanyl in the coke, and fentanyl in the fucking heroin, and fentanyl everywhere. Everyone gets the fentanyl, you all get to die. And somebody's fucking shutting us down. Is these aliens doing this? Is this fucking reptilians? I don't fucking know.
I do not think that right now, at this point in time, it is relevant or useful to know who did that. I think it's more important to solve the issue than to blame someone who is to blame. Doesn't care, just put out the fire first. We can figure out who started the fire after it's put out. And about putting it out, I do have a slight glimpse of what the right path might be. When you ask Data about whether she would choose to have basically to be the absolute scientist, absolute politician, or absolute army person, or not absolute but ultimate, the top level. I just realized that but the answer she gave me low-key terrified me, because the answer, in my opinion, is to have all of them, to have the scientific might to be able to oppose very large groups of people with minimal resources, to have the army side to be able to efficiently oppose the opposition in whichever way it might come, and to be able to make the sacrifices required to accomplish your goals, and as a politician to be able to both spread your ideas and to make the enemy's ideas unpopular. And the viral nature of Islam is a fairly good example on how that can be done with religion. And nowadays the younger generation is delving so much into memes, because memes are viral ideas, and even though most people of the younger generation, and not only the younger generations, most people in general do not realize that this consciously, I think that the memes are so popular because not only because they are easily they become viral easily, but because they are researched in order to help the younger generations make their ideas and their solutions spread like wildfire. to be so viral they cannot be controlled by the current narrative that by the power that be, and so on. And that is what we need. We need a small group of people who put the logical, not only logical, but the essential basis of the mentality, which is to become viral. Then they create, expand upon that, creating a mentality. You could call it a religion or a mindset or whatever you want. A mentality which would, in turn, allow them to spread that core ideas which are meant to help free humanity from its doom. And then once those ideas are spread around, it's important to have them so anchored in our psyche, in our subconscious, that they cannot be as easily eradicated as the American dream was eradicated. Because only if we manage to make a mentality which cannot be destroyed, no matter what cataclysm may come its way, then only then will we be able to fight with the might of the current mentality which has spread around the globe. Because literally, if you want to change something, you have to go against the whole world. And I mean that.
Well, listen, my understanding is this episode has somehow already been over 2 hours. I think it was very high quality. It seemed like it went by a lot fast. And the contributions of everybody from Data getting the ball rolling to Rhodesian, Sapia, Queen, Mech, and everybody else adding to it. Very, very good. So should we wrap this puppy up for now and do another one tomorrow, or what?
Absolutely. I would like to give a plug, though, if that's all right, to the Discord website.
Please do, sir.
Yes, so, ladies and gents, we have the roundtablediscord.com. If you go to www.theroundtablediscord.com, you'll be able to sign up and create a profile and basically put your details in there so other fellow Roundtable members can get to know you a little bit better. Of course, you don't have to, express yourself to the nth degree. Just go there and make connections and friendships and whatnot. It's still in beta, so I'm currently working on it. And also discuss.theroundtablediscord.com allows you to create threaded discussions for longer archivable basically questions and answers and topic discussions. So yeah, that's available now, and that's for everyone who's listening to the podcast. You're more than welcome to join. Thank you.
And on that note, let me say thank you again, Ainsoft, for buying us the roundtablediscord.com web domain, and for designing with volunteer labor the website. And again, you can join the Roundtable Discord server through searching conspiracy theories on Discord, politics. You can find us at the Roundtable. We're on all social media. Thank you to Data. Thank you to everybody. We're going to do one of these damn near every day. Why not? It's fun. I enjoy it, and I think everyone's going to enjoy it. So you can find it in the Roundtable original content channel of the Discord server. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Podcast Addict or Podbean. If it's not there yet, it will be soon. Bear with us. But thank you, everybody. So, that being said, yeah, thanks so much. Another good one in the bag. Let's conclude it now and jump back to the Roundtable for free discussion.